there, friends and sane persons, and welcome to another episode of Wednesday Whimsy. But not just Wednesday Whimsy, no. This is the fourth and final episode of 2023's quarterly Quountdown. Wednesday Whimsy is, of course, a short show where I talk every Wednesday evening about a board game topic, a top 10, or something else that happens to be on my mind. And Quarterly Quountdown is a show within a show where we talk about the 5 best new-to-me games that I played in the last calendar quarter. Now, I will recognize and admit that this is coming up before the end of December. The issue, of course, is that the last 2 weeks of December, I'm talking about my top 23 of 2023. So this is the last, I guess, non-best of the year week. So here we're on, the 13th of December. That's all right. It's still close enough. There could be something new that I play in the next 2 weeks that would have fit on here, but that's okay. I'll talk about it another time. Anyway, I'm just going to talk very quickly about the games, tell you a couple of things about them, show them to you, and then, you can go and check them out yourself. I might someday do a longer episode just about some of these games. We will see what we have time for. But with that out of the way, let's go into the first of the games to be talked about on this quarterly Quountdown. Number 5. Oh, I can do the numbers here. Here we go. Here's number 5. Number 5 is one that I did do an episode about a couple of weeks ago. This is a brand new and new to me game, a solo dice and card game called 20 Strong. So 20 Strong from Chip Theory Games. It is, I'm trying to show the screen here. I don't know why I can't figure it out. I've done it every week for the past couple of years. Here we go, 20 Strong. An exciting game that I am really just still discovering more and more. Every time I open it up, it ends up being more interesting to me. I'll tell you, the box doesn't look all that exciting. But again, in 20 Strong, you have 20 dice, and you are rolling them, trying to overcome different challenges in sort of 3 versions of the game. The dice have very different strength based upon their color. They're going to have more hits. Every die has 1 critical hit, though, that does 2 damage. And you're going to be using them in a solo game that takes about 15, 20, 30 minutes tops. Great to take with you. Small box, small footprint, small profile, but a lot of fun. This is the base version, the Solar Sentinels. There's another version that takes on Too Many Bones, as you can see here, and still another one that takes on Hoplomachus Victorum. But whichever one you decide to play, it looks like this is Too Many Bones again. Whichever one you decide to play, it's just a great time. Again, by yourself, not a great game to play with a friend, but a great game to travel with. In fact, I'm going to be traveling this week, and I plan to take it with me. Just because it's such a good game to play on the go. Anyway, go and check out the full episode talking about 20 Strong. But for now, we're going to end our discussion of 20 Strong and move on to my number 4. Now, let's take this down and move on to my number 4. My number 4 is a game I have not talked all that much about. In fact, it only recently arrived, although it had been sort of touted by other online presenters for a while. But it finally arrived to my table, and I was just so taken by it. It's an interesting game about genetics and breeding. The game is called The Fox Experiment. So in The Fox Experiment, let me see if I can find some pictures here. It should be in my recently viewed. There we go. In The Fox Experiment, what you're doing is, look, I don't know anything if this was a real experiment. Apparently it was. Nothing I'd ever heard of before. But what you're doing in this game is you're trying to breed foxes that exemplify certain traits. And so each round of the game, you're going to take up, well, essentially you're taking turn order, and you're taking a male fox and a female fox. And the foxes themselves are going to have different dice on them. And the dice are going to then be rolled. Like, for example, here we see Dawn and Rhea. Now, these are a later generation fox. but you'll see that they have additional dice on them. So for example, if I had this breeding pair here, I would get a purple die and a purple die, and it looks like 2 brown dice and 1, 2, 3, 4 blue dice and 1, 2 pink dice. And then you would roll these dice and you'll allocate them, and they have symbols and half symbols on them. There's no complete misses, which is nice, but you have to complete the symbols, and then you're going to put those symbols on your offspring, and then that offspring is going to go out for the next generation. And so because of the way this works, right, this barking trait here is going to become more pronounced simply because you're rolling more and more dice with that blue color there. And so in each succeeding generation, those traits are going to become stronger and stronger. And so as you get, the beginning, the wild foxes you can draft have just 1 or 2 symbols on them. I think some of them have 3, but they're kind of a random mix. But as you go through the game, you're creating these other foxes, and then you're putting them out for other people to choose from. You might be able to take them back yourself, but not necessarily. A really interesting game. There's some ways, sort of, that part of it's really interesting. There's some ways to kind of score. You have these experiments. You're trying to sort of create a fox that meets certain traits. And then there are these goals, and these goals aren't all that interesting. I think we're only 8 in the box, and you're using 4 each time. So those are a little meh. But you also have a board where you're going to be using these tokens to unlock special abilities. So there's a lot of customization. Really a very fascinating game. I will say I've played it solo, and solo it wasn't great because it felt like you were spending 80% of the game managing the solo player and only 20% playing it yourself. So I will say, probably not one to play with 1 or even 2, because 2 you still have to mess with the dummy player. But if you have 3 or 4 players, this one's really good. It might even have been higher if it were actually playable at 1 or 2. Anyway, a great game. One to check out. New to me game, and my number 4 for the quarterly Quountdown, The Fox Experiment. Let's go on now to number 3. My number 3 is a game about having a bowel movement, and that is Evacuation. Sorry. I shouldn't make those. Those jokes are beneath me, but that's okay. Evacuation, what you have going on here is you have an old world that is dying and a new world full of possibility. And your goal is to take all of the tokens from your old world and ship them over to your new world. Now, the way you're doing that is through, there's a couple ways to play. I'll mention that in a moment. But what you do is you're going to select these actions. Now, in the base game, you just have these 4 different action bars, and you'll just tuck a card under there to show how many times you've done the action. In the real game, there's a deck of cards that you're going to always have. You have a hand of, I believe, 4 cards, and you're going to play 1 each turn and then replace it. And that it's going to go to one of those slots. It's not going to go. You can play it to go to those slots. Those are just kind of the basic actions, or you can do sort of the interesting action on the card. I found that really interesting. Ultimately, you have some requirements. If you don't get all your stuff off of the old world, you're going to be penalized at the end of the game. You're going to want to build stadiums on your new world or on the old world and ship them over. Because, of course, if you're fleeing a dying world, the first thing you want is a stadium. But you're kind of gradually upgrading your technology as you move your satellites along this track here. You're going to be able to go to better and better spots. You'll then improve your income over here on the new world, because each round you're going to get income in both worlds, and you can only use the resources from one world on the for actions on that world. So you're trying to kind of balance that as well. There's really a lot going on. The first time I played this, I didn't love it, but I'm glad I went back. I think, playing it at 3 is really quite good. Definitely play, there's this race mode and this points mode. The race mode kind of sucks. The scoring is just weird. You're trying to get to a certain goal before the end of and you can end the game early, but then you're penalized and it kind of brings you down below that goal, and then it just ends up who was more balanced. And I find the end game scoring of the race mode to be really unsatisfying. But If you play with points, it's really interesting because you've got goals you're trying to do. You've got, you're trying to get all of the, have the most happy faces. You're trying to, improve your income as much as possible, and then you're not going to have some weird penalties. It's just going to be a point or two. And I definitely prefer the points mode with the advanced action cards. Anyway, it's a very interesting game. It's from one of my favorite designers, Vladimir Sushi. It's a game I did not instantly like. Like I instantly liked or loved Underwater Cities, for example. I instantly loved Pulsar 2849. This is one that took me a time or two. So just go into it knowing that there's really a lot of potential here and a lot of fun to be had. It's just it might require a little bit more effort, especially as you experiment with the different modes of play. But one I really did love and was really excited to try this quarter, my number 3, Evacuation. So let's move on now to my number 2. I realize I probably should have had Evacuation at number 2 just for the joke. Ha 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 ha. Those jokes really aren't beneath me, are they? Anyway, my number 2 is by no means a small game. In fact, it is an enormous game. This game is called Voidfall. Now, Voidfall is almost everything I could be looking for in a game. It is just so interesting and engaging. It's got a compelling artwork as well. It looks like we don't have any good pictures of the game. Lots of mediocre pictures of the game. Well, that's unfortunate. But what you're doing is it's this nice sort of 4X style game, space exploration. These are not the finished components, but you have this empire and you are trying to, now you can play it cooperatively or competitively. I definitely prefer competitively. The cooperative or solo has a lot of weirdness to it that the competitive just, trusts you to balance yourself. But you've got an economy you're managing. You've got these dice that are going to go out on spots, and then they're going to increase your production based upon the value of the dice. You've got these scoring cards you're going to be trying to get that'll give you opportunities to score, and you're going to score them at the end of each round. You've got bonuses galore. The combat is a little bit weird because it's deterministic combat. You can see you're really mostly fighting against this kind of neutral faction. You can fight against each other if you want, but you're just going to sort of knock each other out until one of you is eliminated. But the game itself is just so fascinating. It's a world. It's got all these different factions, all with different things they can do. You've got a bunch of different technology that, each game is going to be really different. It's a big game. It's a long game. It's a hard game to learn. It's an awful game to set up. I mean, setting this thing up, there's just no way to do it quickly, especially because you have to you have all these 20 boxes of the different factions, and you really have to look in each one to find the cards. And there's an app to help, and it does help a lot, but just, this is one to set up before people come over. But the game itself is just so fascinating. I mean, I would give this a 10 out of 10 if it were not such a nightmare to set up and store. As it is, it's probably around a 9 for me. But it's really, it's the biggest game, I think, from this company. And it feels like somebody's masterwork. If it'll be compared, I guess, to Twilight Imperium or to Eclipse. And I feel like it's a nice blend between those. It has this nice economic engine building that's really interesting. There's so many things you can try, so many things you can do. The artwork's good, the component quality is excellent, and it just is almost a sandbox of things. On your turn, you just have so many great choices. What you do is you have this hand of action cards, and the action, you're going to play an action card and do 2 of the actions, but you can save up these tokens so that you do 3. And you might have special custom action cards that are just for you. Really, just rules are actually not that heavy. It's a game I could teach pretty quickly, but learning it from the rule book was really a chore. So just be aware of that. This is one to learn from somebody else. But a really interesting game, and easily I mean, it could have been my number one, other than a couple of, the sort of size and difficulty of setting it up takes it down a little bit. But it's a great game nonetheless. And so what game beat it out? Well, let's go to number one and see. All right, my number one game of the quarter is a game that I only recently got, but was just blown away by. Now, this is based on an older game. It's a new implementation, and I will say probably a better implementation of a great older game. And that game is, let's see, what we have here, Sleeping Gods, Distant Skies. So this game is just a fantastic experience. What you're doing is you are crashed on this planet, or you're not crashed, you've got a plane, but you're stuck on this planet, and you're going to be moving around. Apparently, we're just looking at the plane and the figures here, but you've got this atlas somewhere, and you're what is it with the pictures today? You've got this big atlas, and you're going to be moving around, and then there are these encounter spots. So each turn, you're going to draw two of these ability cards, and they're cards that you can use to help you in certain tests, or you can play them onto your characters that you control to give them special abilities. And that's a big part of the game. You're then going to draw a card from the event deck, resolve it. It can be really anything. Then you're going to go, you've got usually 5 time, but you could have this extra token if you saved an action from a prior turn. You can move around. You can investigate, which means you're going to open the book to these stories. For example, this will be story number 11. It'll give you some kind of choices. As you gain different resources throughout the game, it might say, well, if you have keyword box, come back, go to this different experience. And so, you're going to write down on your map, there you come back with keyword box. But there's enough stuff here that you'll have to play 4 or 5 times through the full game before you have any chance of seeing everything. And I don't think you will even then. It's a huge book of stories. Your ultimate goal is you're going to have these totems, and you're going to want to restore 5 totems, or at least have 5 totems. There's some that you can just get through the story. Yeah, not impressed by the pictures that are available today. But these totems are going to have, oh, there you go. The totems are going to have some sort of requirement on them. And like you can kind of see one down here at the very bottom, because I click there on the bottom and it takes me to the top. Like this one wants you to have 3 berries and 2 leaves. And if you do that, you're going to accomplish the quest, and you can then go in, it'll tell you, look, in this case, pull out card 3, and card 3 is going to be a totem, which gives you some sort of extra bonus special ability. It's usually an adventure card that you can play literally at pretty much any time in the game to give you some kind of a bonus, and then when you do a rest action, you're going to restore them all. So doing this early and getting more of these cards is definitely in your interest. There's an interesting combat system. Now, combat is the slowest and hardest part of the game, but you're going to set up these enemies, and you're doing damage to them, and you'll place these damage tokens trying to cover different abilities, trying to whittle down their health. And it's a very interesting combat system. It's unlike anything else other than Sleeping Gods. This is really a great game. I really loved the story. I loved sort of the way that it encouraged you to come back and try more, because as you go through different campaigns, and a campaign is basically playing it from the beginning to the end, you're going to unlock additional abilities that you'll start the game with. There's different endings based upon how you've done at these things and how many times you've gone through. I've only scratched the surface of what is available in this game. I really like it. I think it might be a little bit more streamlined than Sleeping Gods. Sleeping Gods is also a fantastic game. But that one feels a little bit bigger. This one feels a little bit smaller, yet it does not feel too small by any means. There's definitely a lot to try and see and experience and love here. And it's just, I will say I've only played it solo, and honestly, I might only ever play it solo. It's almost a solo game. You could play it with someone else, but really what you're doing is reading a story, and that can be a solo experience just as well as it can be a shared experience. And so you're reading this story. It's kind of like a big, long, complicated choose your own adventure story. I will also say that it is not short. I played it on Saturday, and I think I started probably around 8 o'clock, and I played it until maybe 2. Now I did stop and take a break in there, so it wasn't 6 full hours of playing, but it was a long experience. So be aware of that coming into it. You can save it and put it away, but I wouldn't. I would just pick a day when you think you can do it. Or if you have a table where you can keep it set up, maybe that. But I really liked it. It did have some nice callbacks to the original Sleeping Gods, although you don't need to have played that one at all. There's just it'll mention some characters that I remembered showed up there or something like that. But ultimately, a very interesting game, very satisfying experience. It looks great too. There's little I can say negative about Sleeping Gods Distant Skies, and that's why, of course, it is my number one of the quarter. So there you have it. And with that, dear friends, we are at the end of another quarterly Quountdown and another episode of Wednesday Whimsy. I will be back next Wednesday, and I will be talking about my top 23 of 2023. I'm going to do that in 2 episodes so that it doesn't go too long. I'll be talking about, I guess, numbers 23 through 13 or something like that. I haven't decided how I'm going to divide it yet. But there's, time until next week to figure that out. I hope you'll come back. Just remember, these games may or may not be on that list because these are just games sort of looked at that were new to me in the quarter, whereas obviously that list is going to be all of 2023. I played a lot of great games this year. But with that said, I'm going to end this here. I'm going to wish you safe travels and courage when you need it, and I hope you'll join me back here again next week for another episode of Wednesday Whimsy. Bye-bye.